Is there anyone here who wasn't watching on the final night of the 2016 Democratic Convention and missed the speech by Khizr Khan? Khizr is, of course, the father of U.S. Army Captain Humayun Khan, who was killed by a car bomb in 2004 while stopping a suicide attack during the Iraq War. Humayun, who was the middle of Khizr's three sons, was posthumously awarded a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Khizr and his wife Ghazala are from Pakistan. The two met while attending the University of Punjab, where he was studying law and she was studying Persian. Once married, they moved to Dubai, then in 1980 to the United States. 6 years later, Khizr earned a Master of Law degree at Harvard, became a U.S. citizen that same year, settled in Silver Spring, Maryland, and ended up working for a major D.C. law firm for a while. After Humayun's death, the Khans moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, to be closer to their other two sons. They got involved with the Army ROTC program at the University of Virginia, where Humayun had been a cadet. Ghazala took a job at a fabric store, and Khizr continued his legal work. At the convention in July of last year, Khizr berated Trump for the proposed immigration ban and for Trump's penchant for stirring the worst of human nature. He urged Trump to visit Arlington and look at the graves of troops of all faiths, genders, and ethnicities who died defending the United States. And he chided Trump for not having sacrificed anything himself. It was an electrifying moment, made all the more so when Khizr pulled from his pocket a small copy of the U.S. Constitution and challenged Trump to read it. In his new memoir, An American Family, Khizr recounts his journey from his birth as the oldest of 10 children born to farmers in Pakistan to his adult life as a practicing attorney in the United States, and now a widely recognized champion of the immigrant community. To this day, Khizr remains a fierce advocate for the rights and values enshrined in the U.S. system and a believer in the innate goodness of America. And he urges the rest of us to respond to today's challenges by stepping forward and speaking out for what we find most important. As one reviewer said, Khizr's story is both unique and archetypal. A New York Times piece called the book not only the story of one particular family's struggles and sacrifice, but also the universal story of the immigrant experience. Khizr will be in conversation with Wajahat Ali, who's a journalist, a writer, lawyer, playwright, TV host, and has been a consultant for the U.S. State Department. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming both Khizr and Wajahat.
An immigrant from Pakistan walks into a synagogue and gets a rousing applause. Takbir Allahu Akbar. God bless America. How's everyone doing? Thank you for joining us. I'm here with a young man, Khizr Khan, who you guys might remember last year took out his copy of the Constitution and, as we say in Urdu, did a thappar, a slap of Donald Trump, and since then has been catapulted into international, I would say, stardom as a voice, a face, a narrative of America, and some would say the resistance. So please welcome Khizr Khan. So first of all, I have to ask, because everyone asks, the Constitution. Do you actually keep a copy in the pocket of your jacket? Yes. Is it there right now, sir? All right. Let it be known. It's there right now. We were discussing in the green room, you said of the 18 grievances, the 7th grievance in that little document is your most favorite. Can you let the audience know what that grievance is?
Sure. First, thank you. I am very much cognizant of where I'm sitting and with whom I am sitting. I'm grateful for this blessed place and grateful for this venue and this opportunity to sit before you and talk about my journey. The reason I have been keeping this pocket-sized constitution in my pocket, that since passing of Captain Humayun Khan, we used to invite cadets at University of Virginia at our home, and I used to give them Senator McCain's book, Why Courage Matters, because for 2 reasons. One, it's an excellent book. Second, that was the last book that I sent to Humayun in Iraq to read. He read it, he liked it very much, and he passed it on to his other colleagues there. So for that reason, we used to give that book, and it costed us about $20 a book. So when 20 cadets come, 20 times $20, it was an expensive gift for us. So I was renewing my American Bar membership. I saw advertisement of U.S. Constitution, pocket size, 99 cents. And I thought,
Always think like an immigrant. Yes, very good. Stretch the dollar.
That I can afford. So we ordered, and since then I've been handing over constitutions, whoever came to visit us, reminding them to read it, and especially our cadets, that when you take oath to defend the Constitution, it'll be this that you will be defending. So since then, but lately you mentioned about Declaration of Independence. I have spoken to about 162 communities throughout the country thus far, and more to go. And one humble reminder I carry with me is that this is the time to read our Declaration of Independence, then read the rule of law, which is enshrined in our articles, which is called Constitution, and then the human dignities that our Creator has bestowed upon every human being, the dignities that are listed in Bill of Rights. So lately I had been reading, there are 18 grievances in Declaration of Independence, 1,338 words, and I implore all of us to read. Lately, my favorite is grievance number 7, and you will see this mark on number 7.
There is a mark there. There is a mark.
That's number 7. This is what we complained to the King of England, that he was not allowing this blessed nation to have. This is what number 7 says. You know, we complain about immigration and immigrants, and so this is what grievance number 7 says. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these estates, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration here, meaning that our then king had prohibited immigration to take place to this blessed land. And we were complaining, this was number 7. This was one of our grievance, our nation's grievance at the time of inception, that we want to have more immigration to make our society dynamic and to move forward. So I remind myself that that is in the DNA. The migration is in the DNA of this nation. That is why I recite that, to remind ourselves that this tapestry, this fabric of American nation, it has immigration managed, controlled properly under policy and under laws, yes, but it is part of our DNA of this nation. So for that reason, I carry this with me.
And maybe we should listen to what Donald Trump tweeted today and do something. For those of you who have been paying attention, he actually tweeted, do something. But not in context to actually making this country part and parcel of the values that were enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. But I digress. We'll have plenty of time to talk about Donald Trump. You have written a book, and I found your story to be much more interesting than that of Donald Trump. And what's interesting is the title of the book is pretty deceptive to me. It's An American Family, a Memoir of Hope and Sacrifice. An American family, not Pakistani, not Muslim, just American. And many might see this as a very bold statement of purpose, identity, and resistance in 2017. Why that title for your memoir? A man who was born in the farms of Punjab, Pakistan.
It is said that America is a nation of immigrants. Not at all. Our story is a humble story of all migration that takes place throughout this blessed world, including United States. We are not a nation of immigrants. We are a nation of the spirit of immigration. And it is that we say that an American family, because since I dreamed in 1972 when I first read the Declaration of Independence, it's all narrated in the book in detail, so I won't ruin your reading pleasure. But
you read that in Lahore. I mean, that's the beautiful part of it. You read about it in Pakistan.
I was second-year law student in 1972, and I had taken a course titled Comparative Studies of World Constitution. Including in that course was Constitution of Soviet Union. Some of you remember there used to be Soviet Union, which is Russia now, only Russia now. And Constitution of Germany, Magna Carta, which is the foundation of the British legal system, and then there was US Constitution materials. On top of those materials was the very first page was the Declaration of Independence. And I looked at the World Declaration, wait a minute. I also come from the heritage of colonized for a couple of hundred years. We struggled for subcontinent's independence. We were given independence. We politically argued, we stood, we protested, and we begged, and we got killed and slaughtered, and still struggled. But wait a minute, is there a nation on earth that declares its independence? This is just impossible that you get up one day and then you declare your independence. You put it on a piece of paper, and 56 of your leaders put their names and their estates and their cities. This is death warrant. So I read it with the second time, trying to understand. It's a little difficult English, but I understood what was being said in that document. So I've been in awe of these values since then, since 1972. So I started to dream that would I be able to ever go and see those people that live under these values, that have that have declared their independence. And then it began to make total sense. By the way, I didn't do too well in that course because I was so focused on US Constitution.
You weren't enamored by the Soviet Union?
I wasn't reading anything else. After Declaration of Independence, in the material was articles, which is nothing. It's the description of rule of law, that as a nation, we will live under these provisions, and this is going to be our constitution, guidelines for us to have our system of government. And that is why it has amazing impact on me since I've been watching this attack on our rule of law. And that was one of the reasons that I waived that Constitution, that please read what it says, how it defines us as a nation of rule of law. And then, of course, the best part for me was, is there a nation that has these dignities that we all as human beings, we aspire to have in our life? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, practice whatever faith you have equal dignity, you have equal rights, freedom of assembly, freedom to complain against your government. Amazing, awe-inspiring. And then I got to the 14th Amendment, and I could not believe that the equality is guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States. I became curious, and since then I have read so many constitutions of the world, trying to find somewhere equivalent to these dignities that are enshrined in our Constitution. There is no other. I implore you to, if you have time and opportunity, read some constitutions of the world, and you will come to realize, wow, what a blessed traditions, values we live under. Under attack momentarily, not perfect, but the best. Not perfect, there is so much room to make it better. And so I remain in awe. Something that I read later on when I became a little more better educated, the first 5 words of the First Amendment explains the dignity and the guarantees in our Constitution. The first 5 words say, Congress shall make no laws, meaning the highest legislative body of this nation cannot touch these dignities: freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. It is amazing guarantee that even the highest legislative body, nowhere else, and I challenge any constitutional expert to show me where else it is written that the highest legislative body of the nation cannot enact, cannot touch these guarantees and these civil liberties, except in the United States of America. It is for that reason that my journey started in 1972.
Young student.
As a dream that, will I be able to sit among those people? And that is why when people say, well, why are you so passionate and this is not the perfect country or nation and all that, I agree it is not perfect, but this is the best as far as human dignities are concerned. Do we have distance to go? Yes, because whenever we talk about liberty, democracy and liberty is not complete without equality. There must be racial equality, there must be social equality, economic equality. Without those equalities, the word liberty is totally hollow. Those who came to Charlottesville running around in the name of liberty and freedom and all that, my question to them had been, I was there, I live in Charlottesville.
You live in Charlottesville?
Yeah, I was there. Question was that you chant liberty. Do you even understand what liberty means? Liberty means that everyone living under liberty has equal rights, equal dignities. How dare you say one is superior than the other? That is contrary to the concept of liberty. But anyway, so the love affair started in 72.
We'll talk about what's happening right now, because you make a very idealistic, passionate defense of America, the America that many of us want to live in, but many, as you have already mentioned, say this is not the America that I have experienced due to my gender or ethnicity or religion. And there is that discord between the word that you fell in love with in Lahore, Pakistan, and the reality that is being experienced today and is being experienced by many people. But you glossed over the interesting aspects of your book, which I thought were very interesting, the aspects of Khizr Khan the young student. And the book also, not just as a memoir and a love letter to America or what America should be, is also a love story. And tell me about the woman in the yellow sari who brought tea to the ambassador.
Yeah.
I will embarrass you.
Yeah, no. I wish she was here. She's recovering from illness, but I spoke Persian, so I was invited to a gathering at her college in the Persian department. She was doing her master's program in Persian literature.
This is University of Punjab.
University of Punjab in Lahore, and Iranian ambassador was invited because of the cultural exchange between Punjab University and Iran. So I went there and I sat down, and there comes a wonderful lady in yellow sari bringing tea. What I observed and what I noticed was that how she dignified her professor.
Right.
So there sits the ambassador, and there is her professor, who is her mentor and advisor to her thesis, and then other faculty member. The very first person she served went straight, instead of to the guest of honor, she went to her professor. And she served him a cup of tea first, and then second was ambassador. I was awe-stricken by that.
But only that aspect, right?
Momentarily.
Yeah, okay.
Momentarily.
Just making sure. Got it.
Momentarily, yeah. That she dignified her mentor, her professor.
And your wife, we should mention, was a master's student in Farsi at University of Punjab.
Yes.
Very highly educated, finishing her thesis at that time.
Yes.
And because of her, she was such a good student, she was kind of given that honor to be in that, unfortunately it was all men at that time, but.
Well, the reason she was asked to be the host was that I didn't know at that time that she spoke fluent Persian because of at home, that's what they spoke. I didn't know that for at least a few months after I met her, that she's a descendant of a very famous Farsi poet, Ahmad Shah Durrani.
Right.
That she was writing thesis on the contribution of her family in the Persian language. I was totally unaware of all that. So for that reason, that she spoke language so fluently that it will be a good exchange between the ambassador and her.
And
so
you wrote this in the book, and I had to write it down because my father, who's I think the same age as you, says the same thing about my mom, because he loves my mom, but he would never say it. So he said the same thing when I asked him, what was it about my mother that you found interesting? My father said, and you said the exact same thing, I quoted it, I was intrigued. And that's about the extent that Khizr Khan goes. Quote, I was intrigued. And then you were so intrigued that in the book you kind of become a quasi-stalker of Ghazala Khan, and you mentioned that you waited to see what bus she would take, and you found out that she took the 7 o'clock bus, and ever since then you took the 7 o'clock bus as well. How long did it take? Did you just know at that time? Like, when did you just know that this is the one for me?
no, not at all. Not initially, up until I began to know her. There had been a couple of events we list in the book that we appeared at the radio station together on a program, and I got to know her a little more and her family through her professor, who she was, and so that moved us forward.
Moved you forward. It moved you eventually, I like that, moved us forward, yes. And eventually, marriage and all that stuff. But you were poor. This is important to know. You were poor. You asked for her hand. You were a young man. Her mom said the following, and I quoted from the book, he is a fine young man, Ghazala, but what can he offer you? And your courtship took time. And as they say in Urdu, from the ghaib, from the unseen, you get this job offer all the way in Dubai. So you go to Dubai, and you say, hey, I have a job offer, and then finally your Ghazala, who then becomes your wife, joins you. And it's in Dubai where you actually have your first encounter with an American. And it's interesting because you talk to us about the Alan and Lisa in Dubai. Because usually the stereotype of Americans abroad is we're loud, we're obnoxious, we're vulgar, we have bad geography, we're overweight. Alan and Lisa did give you your first donut, so that's one of the five. But your second love affair with America began through Alan and Lisa. Can you describe that experience?
Sure. In answering some of Wajad's questions, I am being brief intentionally. And the reason is that
you have to read the book.
Most of you will read the book, so you will have the pleasure of reading it and enjoying those events. Those are very personal moments. The difficulty I had writing all this was that some things you really don't want to remember. But to be honest with your reader, your audience, you spill the beans. And some things in the book you will read, and I highlight them that I have not shared those moments with my family.
Well, I just want to say,
they're reading it now, what really has happened, what took place.
It's all tactfully written, and I just want to say, as a son of Pakistani immigrants, I love that part of the story because oftentimes we don't get that because we come from, a rather reserved culture. So to have a elder uncle say, I was intrigued by her, that warms the heart. But yes, Alan and Lisa had a formative experience.
I was in Dubai. This was my third day. I got there on Friday to settle down and make arrangements so I can go to work Monday morning.
You were 24 years old.
I'm 24 years old, and I have the law degree from Pakistan and the law license, and I am hired there in their personnel department to manage it and to run it. So I arrived Friday. I thought there will be a reasonable hotel, that few dollars that I have in my pocket, I could check in for 2 nights. But there wasn't any. I was totally unaware of that. So I rented a room from the cabbie that drove me from airport to the city. And the room was nothing but just 4 walls and a door, and no bed, nothing at all. So for 2 nights, I had the suitcase as my pillow and my towel as my bed sheet, and that's that. So Monday morning, I show up for work. My boss, then very first American, and you have to forgive me if I lose my composure, because the kindness that was displayed by this first American, and that is why nobody has thus far have been able to convince me that this is not the most generous nation. Anyway, so I show up for work, and after other formalities, he takes me to his office. He says, Khizr, this is your work. This is expatriates that are coming in, and these are locals we are hiring, and let's organize this, and we are to start operation in a month or so let's get going. And then he looks at me and he says, you look very tired. Where you been staying? So I was reluctant, and I told him in a room I rented from a cabbie. He said, what cabbie? So I told him what was taking place. He paused, he picks up the phone and makes a phone call. In half an hour, his wife, Lisa, amazing, generous woman, amazing, kind and thoughtful person, she shows up and he looks at her. He says, are you ready? She says, yes. So he tells me, he said, Khizr, let's go. I said, where are we going? He said, you're going home. So I told him, I said, I am not taking you where I'm staying. He said, no, let's go. You have a home. So
with a bed.
Yeah. So he takes me to a one-bedroom apartment that company has several of those, because whenever these expat employees would come to Dubai, they would be staying temporarily there. So we walk in. I have never seen such a wonderful place ever before in my life. It has towels, it has plates, it has spoons, and then the refrigerator.
Spoons, even spoons, wow. Waldorf.
It has refrigerator, and Lisa opened the door, and there's bread and butter and jam, and on the stove was the tea kettle and the tea bags of variety and all of that. They told me that you take the rest of the day off, rest, and we will see you tomorrow, and then they left.
And it was like that, and that relationship was like that.
Yeah. What happens momentarily after that, you have
Is
to
in the
read
book.
it in the book.
When you ate your first donut, was it just the most amazing experience of all time? Did your love for America swell? Was it? Did you just go recite, memorize the Star Spangled Banner right then? The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
It was amazing encounter, and I told Ghazala because thereafter Lisa and Ellen became our like our parents, adopted parents, and they celebrated our wedding. They celebrated Ghazala's coming to Dubai, and so that's how I know America. That's how I know American nation, and that imprint on my heart and on our soul. We used to look at, and whenever we would talk about the generosity, the kindness that Ellen and Lisa had extended to us, thought, I know the reason why I think most people in America are that way. And this used to be our private conversation, and I used to tell her that I wish you could read the founding documents of this nation, which has made Ellen and Lisa. So for us, this entire nation has become Ellen and Lisa. And I just cannot remove that tilt in my heart and in my soul about my blessed nation, my blessed country, that it is the most generous, kind, thoughtful, decent beacon of hope for the rest of the world. I just cannot remove that imprint on my heart and soul. That is why you hear me speak about these dignities, about this generosity, about this kindness and thoughtful nation that this is. And then I agree with you that some of us have different experience. Some of us had a different way of knowing America. But fundamentally and basically, this is a most generous, kind, thoughtful, decent beacon of hope nation, and it remains such. It will remain such because of those founding principles.
We can add Khizr next to Alan and Lisa as great American exports as well. Let's do two more questions. We'll open it up. Talk to me about your son, Humayun, because when it comes to most kids, Pakistani kids, I'm speaking on behalf of all Pakistani kids, you know, your father, who's a Pakistani American immigrant, doesn't say, "Beta, go join the ROTC, and then go join the army and take part in an unpopular war in Iraq." And Humayun, hero, Purple Heart, Bronze Heart, saved his fellow soldiers, sacrificed himself, 2004. You always seem to encourage these proclivities. You know, how was he different from the beginning? Did you see some spark in him that was different from your other two sons?
Yeah, he was in 5th grade. Ghazala got a call from his principal's office. "Mrs. Khan, please come to principal's office right away." She called me, I was at work, and she said, "I got a call from principal's office, so I'm headed there. I'm concerned what happened, what Humayun did." So she gets there, and Humayun is in principal's office. A girl and a boy is in principal's office from Humayun's class, and Humayun's teacher is sitting there. So Ghazala entered the principal's office worried, and Principal said, Mrs. Khan, please don't worry, nothing bad happened. Something good I wanted to share with you right away. You see that boy, he was bullying this girl. They are both Humayun's class fellows. And Humayun did something we wish all his students would do. Humayun stood up to this boy and told him that you will never bully this girl ever again. And the teacher noticed that, and I just wanted to pay compliment to Humayun in front of you so you would know that how proud we are. So that was Humayun. That is how we had known him. In high school, he used to teach swimming at John F. Kennedy High School in Silver Spring. He used to teach swimming to handicapped children. So I would ask him, when do you have time to practice? You're on the swim team. And he would say, the pleasure I get when these little kids learn to swim and play in the water, and then I make time to swim myself and practice. So that was Humayun that we had known. So when he goes to to University of Virginia, and one day we were visiting him. We were living in Northern Virginia then, and they were in Charlottesville, Virginia at University of Virginia. We go to visit one weekend, and he tells us that he's thinking of joining Army ROTC. As concerned parents, and I had been, and I remain, and I never hesitate to share this with others, that I had been against the American adventurism in Middle East for one reason, and I was with the group that was against the war in Iraq. I know a little bit of history of that part of the world. I knew that our involvement in Middle East, in that part of the world, under those circumstances, would not serve our interest. We were right then, we are right now. The time has proven that that was a misadventure, and it had costed a very large amount of money and American blood. Whenever I go to Arlington Cemetery, I pray at, I'm a person of faith, we pray at Humayun's grave site, and then I go to the end of the section 60, and I stand there and I pray for all those who have lost their life in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Most of them are buried in section 60. So I remind myself, this is the cost of the war. The people that are buried there, my sons, my hero, brave sons and daughters that are buried there, 19-year-old, 21-year-old, 22 years old, 18 years old. Such is the cost of the war. So we were very much against the war. And we told him that we don't want you to join because, not because of the war, but because when you join large organizations take over your life. You don't know where you will be working, where you will be staying, where you will be eating, and where your family be. That organization take over. We don't want you to join. And he said, and that is where we yielded, he said that whenever I am with the cadets, they are so honorable, they are so dignified, they are so hardworking, they are so focused on their work and mission in college, in classes, otherwise. I feel, these are exact his words, I feel in my element when I am with them. Now, which parent of a grown person would refuse, would decline?
Pakistani parents.
So
Pakistani parents would refuse.
So we agreed.
But you guys are outliers, thankfully. But
So we agreed. So we agreed.
so you encouraged him, and you know, we're living in this time, and we're going to open it up to Q&A. In Q&A in about 5 minutes, there's 2 microphones here, where you originally, and people forget this, were asked to talk about your son at the Democratic National Convention, and then you ad-libbed and took out the Constitution. But here we are now in 2017 America, and you mentioned sacrifice, and I have to mention this because it's in the news. Donald Trump told Maisha Johnson, about her husband who was slain in Niger, U.S. Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, only 25 years old, that, quote, he knew what he signed up for, which made her cry, and that record was backed up by Congresswoman Wilson from Florida. Later, four-star General John Kelly defended the president's remarks, who has since refused to apologize and said that he never said that, even though John Kelly said that he said that, but I digress. And then President Trump also said he has, quote, one of the great memories of all time. Not making that up. When you hear that as a Gold Star parent, President Trump's response not only to Humayun's sacrifice, what he said about your wife Ghazala after the DNC convention, but also what he said specifically in response to Maisha Johnson and the sacrifice of her husband, U.S. Sergeant LaDavid Johnson. A, how does that make you feel? And the second question I want to ask is, do you think race matters in the sense that if it was a white soldier, if Ghazala Khan was Gabi Khan, not Muslim, not Pakistani, do you think he would have reacted the same way?
Well, Ghazala responded to Donald Trump and his ignorant statement herself, writing an op-ed in Washington Post
right.
that he doesn't know me, he doesn't have a sense of empathy, and that under those circumstances, when my son's picture is on the screen, I'm unable to speak. But a person with no empathy, no understanding of these matters would utter the kind of words that he uttered. But coming back to Sergeant LaDavid Johnson and other three, my sons, all four of them sacrificed their life under very difficult circumstances, fighting the menace of terrorism to protect us under very difficult circumstances in Africa. We were accorded all the dignity and the privacy that such moments of grief in any family's life dictate, require. We were granted total privacy. We were extended all courtesies that a grieving family would need to begin to gather themselves. First few days, few weeks are very difficult in family's life, especially losing a member of the family under the circumstances that these, our heroes' sons and daughters, stand for our sake, for our national security's sake. I was taken to the funeral home when the body of Captain Humayun Khan arrived, and the casualty officer stood to my right in full salute, and the second officer opened the coffin for me to recognize Captain Humayun Khan. And I did. Beautiful face, amazing, as if he would smile and would say, oh, I was just, anyway. So we were given that courtesy. But in case of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson and his family, that courtesy was not extended. I fully understand, because I have participated in the funerals of those that have died under the circumstances where body is not recognizable. If you go to Arlington Cemetery, go to section 60, and you will see multiple tombstones with 6 names on it. One grave, 5 names, 4 names, somewhere it is more than 8 names. The accident in which these brave heroes died was such that the bodies could not be segregated, could not be separated. They had to be buried together and all that. So those are all understandable circumstances. But what broke my heart again and again when this saga continued for several days was that no one was refraining, no one was restrained. Everyone was using this moment of their grief for political expediency, including the president, including his incompetent advisors. Nobody was telling them that this is the moment when the nation should restrain, should extend utmost courtesy and dignity and respect, because that is our character. That is how we honor our heroes. That is how we honor these brave men and women that sacrifice themselves. We don't make their death as a matter of political expediency. That is where the sadness about the behavior of the president's closest advisor comes into play. He gets up and he makes political statements and all. We honor John Kelly's service to this nation. We honor his family's sacrifice to this nation. We fully understand, but now he is on public's payroll in the White House. That is people's White House, this nation's White House. The dignity of this nation that it accords, that it extends to its sons and daughters that sacrifice their life must be adhered to. His advice to this president should have been, because he knows that this person is not articulate in uttering proper words, in explaining and expressing with proper sentiments. Therefore, he should have been advised, do not get involved. They encouraged him to get involved because it was politically expedient for him. So he can begin to brag, I made the phone call, I spoke to the family, I did this and I did that. That all could have been avoided simply saying, do not call. Or if he had to call, write the script. Then worst, and that is, I blame on his advisors, especially John Kelly, and this is my gripe to him, about him. He knows the protocol, how the call is made. Call is not made that president picks up the phone and dials the number and speaks to the family. It doesn't happen that way. The White House calls, asks the person, we want to speak to such and such person. Are you such and such person? Do you have privacy? Can you take this telephone call? President wishes to speak with you. Would you rather speak some other time if you do not have privacy? Nothing of that sort was done. The family is traveling towards the funeral home in the car.
Speakerphone.
And the call is made. People were not, that is where the height of the incompetence, and that is where my heart broke, that my wonderful, wonderful daughter, that she is pregnant. She should have not been put under those stress. Then White House and the rest of these leaders that use that moment for political expediency must have known the condition of the body of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson. No courtesy was extended to inform the parents or next to kin that it is this reason that we do not wish to extend the disrespect towards the body of the sergeant.
Do you think it would have been extended if he were white and his wife were white?
I wish that they all would treat these matters equally. When we go to serve our nation, when our young men and women go to serve our nation, they are not serving white America or black America or such an America. They go to serve a nation with wholeheartedly. I wish to pay tribute to our armed services, our armed forces. The most competent armed forces in the entire world are American armed forces, and there's a reason for that. Those armed forces are fully integrated, meaning all races, all faiths, all religions, all ethnicities are included, not only in the lowest level, but at the highest level, and I have met most of them. I am amazed at why that is not reflected among our nation in its values, in its other ventures. Most integrated are our armed forces. That is why they are considered, and they are truly so, the best of America.
And I'll open it up to Q&A if you guys want to come up to the two microphones. But many would say that there are different ethnicities and different religions who are fighting for our country, dying for our country, bleeding the same color red, and they come back home to a country where based on their ethnicity, their race, their last name, the lineage of their parents, or if the fact they have ovaries, they will not be treated equally in 2017 America. And the question I want to ask you before we open up to Q&A is, when you looked at the 2016 election, and this might be a bold question, was it the election of Donald Trump essentially a rejection of you, your identity, your family, your being, your religion? Khizr Khan, Pakistani American Muslim immigrant, stood up there at the DNC, took out his constitution, waved it, and yet study after study shows in 2017 America that most of the people who voted for Trump, even the people who switched from Obama and went for Trump, were based on two factors: immigration and race, specifically, the Muslim issue. So it was a racial factor that caused a lot of the switches. And you sat there, and you've sat here today for the past year, articulately, passionately, sincerely advocating for the America that you believe in, that brought you to this country. And yet we're sitting here in 2017, Donald Trump, Charlottesville, Muslim ban, the end of DACA, and so forth. So in a sense, do you sit here now and say, a part of that America that I love rejected me and rejects me?
Well, last night I was at Human Rights Campaign's dinner. Hillary Clinton came there to speak. I was so glad to hear her. And somebody, I spoke as well, and someone among the speakers said that she got the most vote of this nation. So what are we talking about? This is a minority president. These anomalies take place in democratic system. We were not fully participating, and that is what I implore America to do henceforth. Few days from now, there is another election coming. Do not take this for granted. We are under attack.
Are you talking about Virginia, governor?
Internally, Virginia, yes, Virginia and New Jersey. I campaigned for Phil Murphy 3 days ago. I spent full day campaigning and warning my nation that we are under attack internally from the divisiveness, these racist groups that have been under the rock because of our laws, because of our system of government. They have found strength to rise up and attack Charlottesville and other places. They must be buried back so deep, and I'll tell you the reason why I so passionately speak about this in a second, that they should be buried so deep that they will never rise their head again, because I saw Nazi flag being carried on the streets of Charlottesville and the chants that most of you must have heard. Second reason is that I talk about Soviet Union. That is no more, it's Russia. They have not forgotten, and I want America to remember that, they have not forgotten that grudge. They do not like our system of government. In the last century, democracy throughout the world had expanded. Smaller nations were looking towards our rule of law. How can we dignify our nations, our people? Therefore, they took that challenge, they planned it, and they attacked because of our non-participation or less participation in democratic process. Because what, 30% or less than 30% participate in this nation? We all should participate. It is an obligation of every American that is concerned about our way of life, meaning we are self-governing people. We don't like dictators. We don't like authoritarians in the White House.
Some of us
we don't
apparently like authoritarian.
We don't like dictators. We are self-governing people. We choose our leaders. We make mistakes like we did in last year's election, but we will correct it very soon, which will start from 7th of November this year. We will begin to correct.
We'll throw in an inshallah to that, God willing. All right.
It is absolutely necessary for every American to think of this. We don't want to have the feelings we had on 8th of November last year. We want to make sure that the world knows that America knows that their democratic system of life had been under attack by those who do not wish this country well, and they are talking, they have become aware, they will resist, and they will not let that happen again. It's only then that we will move forward successfully based on our values and our system of government and our rule of law. Otherwise, this minority had been exploited. I tell my Republican brothers and sisters who have voted based on that false propaganda, that was Russian propaganda, that was Russian intervention. Maybe there was some element that was not affected by that, but most of Trump voters were affected by that Russian propaganda. We should be aware of it, we should talk about it, we should talk loudly about it so that it could be defeated and we move forward with our values, with our system of government. Difference of opinion, yes. Republicans win sometime, Democrats win sometime. We maintain civility in our discourse. We lost that civility because they wanted to sow division among us. It is a cyber attack on this nation, and we should take it as such, this challenge, and I assure you that I have traveled Portland, Oregon to Texas, Indiana to Toledo to Minneapolis, Houston, Dallas, everywhere the sentiment is same that this nation realizes that we have been attacked. This is a cyber attack on our values. We will defend our nation, our values, and we will not let that prevail anymore.
All right. We'll probably be talking a lot about Trump-Russia this week, probably tomorrow. I wonder why. Okay, let's take 3 questions at a time. Sir, to the right, yes.
Okay, thank you for your talk tonight, very inspiring. So I have a 2-part question related to diversity, and you've hit some points of it, some aspects of it already, but my question is this. So how do you respond to the popular notion that America is a Christian nation and that migration of people from Islamic countries represents a major threat to its values and social order?
All right. Thank you for that very easy question. Ma'am?
I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know nothing can replace Humayun, but I hope that the love and reverence that we all feel for you is some sliver of solace for you. I did have a question, though. Speaking as an anonymous citizen, there's so much that needs doing, and it's almost hard to know where to put one's efforts, one's limited time. And I'm wondering if you've given any thought to, I don't know whether to lead a movement of any kind, but certainly to advise those of us who care so much about this country. What is the one thing you would advise us to focus our efforts on in the coming years? Thank you.
We'll take one more.
And mine kind of follows that as well, Mr. Khan. Given your optimism when you first came to this country, given the sacrifice that your family has made for us, and given your understanding of our founding documents and how our government works, I wonder if you've given any thought to running for office.
Okay. So, let's start with those 3. Khizr Khan, running for office.
Yeah. Momentarily, I will answer my brother's question first. This nation's founding documents list freedom of religion, to practice religion or not practice any religion is the founding value of this. The rest is all politics, momentary convenience, whatever suits. To alienate one community from the others is, you're not strengthening your security, you're weakening your security. You're giving a moment for those who don't wish us well to prosper, alienating one faith community or the others. And to include both of your very kind questions. Among thousands and thousands of letters, my brother, we received since August of last year, and we have saved all of them. There is one letter that I always mention, and that letter is 26 pages, written by an retired army nurse. She served in Second World War, and she writes the whole story, where she served, what she was doing, how she dealt with the difficulties and all. And then at the end, on the last page, she says to us, Mr. and Mrs. Khan, continue to speak. Continue to speak. We wish if more people had spoken prior to Second World War in Europe, in Germany, this humanity could have avoided the atrocities that were committed against our brothers and sisters of Jewish faith, against the humanity that lived and suffered during the Second World War. Continue to speak. Do not stop, even if you're left alone. Continue to speak. It is that I suggest as a solution. All of us must continue to speak to each other, to groups, smaller or larger, remind ourselves the difficulties that we are facing, the difficulties that lie ahead. If we silence our enemies, those who do not wish us well have won. But we will not let that happen. We will continue to speak. I just came back from 3-4 nights ago. I was in Boston, invited by Terrorism Music Foundation. This humble person, I apologize for losing composure, totally undeserving of that legacy award of Terrorism Music Foundations. Prior to the ceremony, we sat and we listened to the music that was composed in the German camps by these wonderful, wonderful musicians. I watched with my own eyes the songs that were sang by the small children in the camp. Nazis had made movies of this to show the propaganda, but so those moments were preserved. I looked at those faces of the children. I looked at the faces of those musicians that composed that music. And my question to the gathering after this wonderful music festival was, how dare we are not hopeful? Look at these faces. Everyone saw on a screen how hopeful they were. They all knew the circumstances, what lies ahead of them. But they continue to compose music, they continue to give us hope, left this legacy for us to hear. And look at the faces of those children, how hopeful they were when they were singing in the camp. How dare we are not hopeful? Our circumstances are not that bad, because this is 2017. The mankind has moved forward, has come so far, we will not go back. And I cannot remember, and I must mention that there was a display on the screen. And one of the composers of that wonderfully beautiful music, such a hopeful music, this was the message that was left for us. Do not forget me, and we will not forget them. This gathering, all of 162 of my speaking engagements had been under that spirit. I just didn't know that I will receive the Legacy Award under that spirit. We will not forget what these racists did, what these Nazis did to my brothers and sisters and the rest of the humanity. We will not let them repeat it. They came to Charlottesville, but they were thrown out of Charlottesville. I was there on Friday night. I was there on Saturday when my daughter, Heather Hare, was murdered by the car. I was there. And then I was there on Wednesday when all America showed up there. I am sure most of you are aware Charlottesville celebrated throwing them out of Charlottesville, showing the true values of this blessed nation. Small children, families came with candle lights on the same route where these racists have attacked Charlottesville. So this nation is a nation of goodness, of good people, good-hearted, genuine, sincere. We just were quiet. We were not aware what could happen. So let's not be silent. If one thing we can learn from all of this experience, and at my humble request to you is, let's not be quiet. Let's continue to speak. Whatever platform, whatever station we are in, wherever we are standing, whatever our capacity is, remember, in democracy, please remember this, silence is death. Remember that when you wake up on 7th. Remember these few words, silence is death. Non-participation is death. Your values, your rights, everything will be trampled upon if you do not get up and take few hours. Before you drop that vote, remember what I shared with you. At that moment, there is sacredness in that act, in that gesture, be it pressing the button, there is sacredness. You are standing for the goodness of this country. You are participating in the making sure that our system of government, our system of being self-governing people is defended by dropping that vote.
Who should they vote for on November 7th?
That is our choice. That is our choice.
You don't have any
But
opinions
do
on that? Or-
Participate. But do
And
participate.
well, and we have 2 more questions because we have 3 minutes left. But are you running for office?
No, I have been asked and advised and suggested and all that. I was at the Capitol Hill with the Democratic caucus, and wonderful encouragement was extended. And I said that choice between running for an office or carrying a broom to mop the streets, mop the steps of the Capitol, I rather mop the
You mop the streets of the Capitol. Okay.
steps of the Capitol.
Someone has to purchase the mop, though. All right. Let's do the final 3 questions with 2 minutes that we have left. We'll get in there somehow.
Hi, Mr. Khan. I really don't have a question. I actually served with your son. I was out in Iraq. I was part of 201st. And I just wanted to thank you for raising such an amazing. He was such an incredible person, and at some point, I would love to just embrace you and just say thank you for raising him. I mean, when I was just a little private and I had no faith in the military, he restored my faith, and so thank you for raising such an amazing young man.
You were in Bakuba?
Yes, I was in 201st with him. He was my LT in shop office. I have
Amazing.
pictures. I actually have a picture with him, and I have it in my office. And
Amazing.
you know, I take my sons to Arlington all the time to lay flowers for him. So, and my brother is buried there too. So,
What is your name, ma'am?
Vanessa Brennis.
Vanessa, you can embrace him now.
But I will come there. I will come there.
Yeah, come.
I will come there.
Let's do the final 2 questions.
So what I don't think was mentioned here at all is that Donald Trump dodged the draft. And I don't
Bone
need to-
spurs.
Sure, yeah. So I don't need to name all the other things because all of you have named it. And to those of us here, it's apparent that he's unfit to be commander-in-chief. But I'm going to ask, how do we craft this message to reach the large swaths of our country that actually did vote for Donald Trump, that this guy's unfit to lead our military?
Okay, that's 1 question, and the final question.
I actually want to ask a different question just about writing your memoir. I really appreciate, or I just found the love story very beautiful. And as a child of immigrants, parents who've never told me how they met because they said it's not relevant and I just need to go to Harvard and get good grades. I was just curious about how you came to write your story, because I know you mentioned a lot about valuing privacy in a family, and I feel like my parents are the same way. But I really value, I think, that sharing of that story of immigration with your children and just kind of like everything that the homeland brings. So I'm just wondering how to start that conversation because I'm kind of scared.
I'm assuming your father was also intrigued.
I don't
by
even
your
know. Was
mother.
he intrigued? Was he amazed? Surprised?
No, that's fantastic. So we have, with 1 minute that we have left, we have 2 questions, and she makes a good point because the memoir is actually a love story. It's a love story about your love relationship with Ghazala, your love for your children, your love for your country, your love for America, your love for these values, and you know, in our communities, ethnic immigrant communities, we don't share those stories, and yet you have taken that leap to share that story, and so sharing that story and also combining that question to the gentleman's question, how do you share this narrative to those who voted for Trump? Because you have, as you mentioned, you've gone all across the country on 160 speaking engagements. What's the message?
Well, you see, there is something very symbolic. The very first page is part of the pages of the Constitution that I had carried in my pocket for many years. First and the last page. This is a symbol. All of my life, our family's life. In fact, it's a misnomer. It shouldn't be Khizr Khan, it should be every immigrant. This is the story enshrined between the pages of our Constitution and especially the 14th Amendment, Section 1. So Ghazala and I were traveling, and at Charlotte Airport, a couple came to us because people were asking, when did you come to this country, where you lived, what did you do, and what took you to a stage, and all of that. And we will try to be as humble and as detailed as possible. So a couple was watching us answer these questions, standing in the walkway of the airport, and they approached us and they said, why don't you write something instead of answering these questions in such a places and all. So the idea was placed in our mind and our heart that it may be a good idea. I was, again, reluctant. I had been very private and humble person, not sharing everything with everybody. But then we wanted to, in the spirit of, because this story is not our story, it's a story of every immigrant. We go through, we become citizens of this country, not because we are born here, we become citizens of this country because we struggle to become Americans. I remember, I wish every American should read the oath that immigrants take when they become citizens. I entered having no dignities, no guarantees, and that after the oath, that little green piece of paper was given to me as a certificate of citizenship. I looked at it. I had all the dignities and guarantees that every human being on this planet Earth wishes to have. I have it. It's in our Constitution. And then again, I say this, and this conversation can continue all night. We call our rights as inalienable rights. But please remember, these rights may be inalienable, but these are not self-executory. You and I make it self-executory. We stand up for these rights. That is what makes them inalienable and executory. These are only written on pieces of paper. When we go to the courthouse to stand for these rights, that is when these rights become executory. When Muslim ban was issued, that illegal, unconstitutional, with all these speakings and all these running around airport to airport, community to community, I decided to file an amicus brief to inform the court what it means to be Muslim in America. I filed the brief in Ninth Circuit and then in the Supreme Court as well. It took amazing resources and help from friends and putting it together and all that. What I mean to say is that there comes a time in every person's life when you have to do some, you have to do more, and then do some more because the values that you have cherished mean so very much to you. So remember that on 7th of November, not only this 7th of November, but every 7th of November, that is when you make these inalienable rights executory. It is very important that we all participate in our process.
If you don't vote, he's coming for you. Khizr Khan is coming for you if you do not vote. He knows where you live. I'll end it on this. The book is Khizr Khan, An American Family, a memoir of hope and sacrifice. And in the first chapter, you cite the best-selling poet in America, which people don't know is actually Rumi, a Muslim poet who wrote in Farsi and lived over 800 years ago. And a lyric of poetry that you cited is, "So what if you're thirsty? Always be a river for everyone." And so thank you.
Let me
Yeah, please.
recite that in Farsi.
Farsi is much better.
It is so beautifully said. In English, it's transliteration with lots of handicaps. It says, Tishne bash o darya bash, meaning that, so what if you're thirsty? Be river for others. That is what life is. I must mention this, this is our constitution. This is for middle school children. We were invited to a middle school in Charlottesville, in Peabody Middle School, to speak, and I saw middle school children having printed from the internet, copies of the Constitution, and they had cut and paste. And I asked, is there an interesting book for our middle school students? And their teachers that had been teaching civics to middle school for 20 years, 15 years, they said none. So we put together something for it's dedicated to our middle school children. This is our Constitution, and you will find it of some interest. At the end, I wish to mention that this exercise of writing this book had been another purpose, not only to share this story, our story, all of immigrants' story, is that we have set up scholarship. We have endowed a scholarship which is fully funded from the proceeds of this book at University of Virginia. The name of this scholarship is Captain Humayun Khan Memorial Scholarship Fund. It is set up in perpetuity. We have funded it from the proceeds. It exists now, and it is fully operational. It's need-based scholarship. So some good from the sacrifice of Captain Humayun Khan continues to come, and continues to come now and in future as well.
So you have to buy the book to help the scholarship. And in the green room, Khizr Khan said, "I really like this book. This is our Constitution." This is the one he was really excited about. So buy this book as well. And that's a beautiful poem. So what if you're thirsty? Always be a river for everyone. I think I could speak for most people here. Thank you for being a river for so many thirsty Americans. Khizr Khan.